The rapidly growing volume, granularity, and availability of recorded data around the world, combined with the urgency of responding efficiently and effectively to mitigate and abate the global COVID-19 pandemic, makes this a particularly opportune time to reflect on the use of big data in measuring development impact. This presentation provides an overview of one stock-taking effort recently conducted by 3IE to get a sense of the scope, scale, and applications of big data in measurement studies, impact evaluations, and systematic reviews. As we discuss the findings, we will highlight specific details related to nighttime light data. What we're seeing right now is the collision of two fields of study: data science, which has grown dramatically in recent years, and impact evaluation. This is generating numerous opportunities for strengthening impact evaluation, but it's also creating new challenges to address. One natural question is, what's going on right now? How are people using big data for measuring and evaluating development outcomes? How does this vary by geography or outcome? What are the main technical, methodological, and ethical issues emerging? And more broadly, what lessons can be derived for impact evaluation going forward? To answer these questions, we started by systematically searching the literature for measurement studies, impact evaluations, and systematic reviews using big data to study any type of outcome within the Sustainable Development Goals framework. The search yielded over 17,000 records, which we then screened down to 437 studies, which became the foundation of our systematic map. The systematic map visually summarizes the evidence base, categorizing studies by the big data sources used, listed in the row headings on the left side of the map, by the development outcomes studied, shown in the column headings at the top of the map, and by study type, indicated by the legend at the bottom. We also include a confidence rating for the systematic reviews based on a critical appraisal of those papers. In each cell, you can see the size and type of the evidence base linking a particular type of data source to a specific development outcome. If you access the map on the 3IE website, you can also hover over each of these bubbles to see the underlying studies and click on the links to access them. So, what did we find? We found that overall, there is a sizable and rapidly growing number of measurement studies using big data, shown in the middle row on the left, but a much smaller number of impact evaluations. This gives us a sense that there is a lot of work being done to develop appropriate measures using big data, which could subsequently be used in impact evaluations. We also see that the bulk of the big data sources are machine generated, mostly satellites, represented in the light blue. Case in point, satellite data was used in over 70% of the measurement studies and in over 80% of the impact evaluations. Of the 39 impact evaluations that used satellite data, a total of 9, or roughly 23%, used nighttime light data. For reference, of the other 30 impact evaluations, close to all studies used some form of daytime aerial imagery, focusing on land use, weather information, pollution information, and so on. In contrast to the machine-generated sources, there were far fewer process-mediated sources, shown in red, including administrative data, call detail records, e-transactions, basically events that are systematically logged as they happen, and human source data in dark blue, including social media, crowdsourcing, citizen reporting. The top categories of outcomes studied are environmental sustainability, economic development and livelihoods, urban development, and health and well-being. For the impact evaluations using nighttime lights data, 6 studies evaluate economic outcomes, 2 evaluate environmental outcomes, and 1 looks at urban development. For the most part, nighttime light data is used to construct variables for economic development or urbanization, either independently or in conjunction with daytime satellite imagery. Overall, 8 studies using nighttime lights data were conducted in low and middle income countries, and 2 studies were conducted in the high income region. These countries include Palestine, Liberia, Burundi, Rwanda, Bangladesh, Brazil, China, and Colombia. So, why is nighttime light data useful for impact evaluation research? As with other types of remotely sensed data, nighttime light helps address some key challenges in impact evaluation using conventional data collection methods. Here we'll focus on 3 examples. First, remote sensing helps us measure more. There are a variety of variables that may be quite useful for measuring development effectiveness, whether as an outcome or a covariate in the analysis, but that are difficult to measure accurately or at a required temporal and spatial scale using conventional data collection methods. Examples include economic growth, GDP, poverty or wealth at the subnational level, infrastructure quality, population distribution, and so forth. There's a rapidly growing body of research demonstrating how nighttime light can be used as a proxy for some of these variables. Second, remote sensing helps us construct a counterfactual. Because satellites are always on across geographic areas and over time, you can estimate these variables in the same way for your intervention and comparison groups, before, during, and after a program. This is a major benefit of nighttime light data and other satellite data, which is not present for some of the other sources of big data I mentioned, such as call detail records, online searches, and social media, which can be substantially biased because the people generating the data are different in important ways from those who are not. This helps evaluators do a better job of constructing a counterfactual, whether by matching intervention and comparison units on key pre-programmed characteristics, by delineating clear and precise spatial boundaries around intervention and comparison areas in a regression discontinuity design, by verifying assumptions about pre-programmed trends in a difference in difference design, or other approaches. Third, remote sensing makes it easier to conduct research in locations and situations that are otherwise more difficult to study, including fragile contexts, difficult to reach areas, humanitarian crises, and global pandemics. If you are considering using nighttime light data for an impact evaluation, there are some key considerations and challenges you should keep in mind. One perhaps obvious but important caveat is that there needs to be a clear and defined spatial dimension to the intervention. So a transportation infrastructure project is a good bet, but a workplace productivity program, not likely. And a corollary requirement is that these details about the program actually have to be available, including the precise spatial boundaries of intervention areas and the start and end dates for each area. This seems simple enough, but is not always easy to obtain. Secondly, the accuracy of anthropogenic light emission data is dependent on the spatial resolution, which varies depending on the specific data set you use. Thirdly, there may be inconsistencies in long-term time series data. Due to changes in atmospheric conditions, shifting of satellites, sensor degradation, and other technical issues, it can be difficult to meaningfully compare satellite data over time. Fourth, the need for ground truthing is very important, as there is a high possibility of under or overestimation of the intensity of human activity based on specific methods used to predict the variable. Similarly, it is often challenging to design machine learning algorithms that are robust enough to enable generalization over space and time. Other challenges of using big data, including nighttime light data, are related to transparency and ethics of using such data sets, including consent, data privacy, data security, and unintended exclusion. Though these issues have been widely noted in the literature, they were discussed only minimally or not at all in many of the studies identified through the systematic mapping exercise. There's also a general expectation that impact evaluations using big data will be less expensive than those using conventional data collection methods, especially when they are conducted retrospectively on interventions that have already been completed using existing data. But in actuality, there is very little reported information on costs to do a meaningful comparison. So what does this all mean? Going forward, we expect to see increased use of big data to measure and evaluate development outcomes. We can reasonably anticipate that clusters of measurement studies in a particular area on the big data systematic map will be followed by an uptick in impact evaluations as those measures are validated, as those particular data sources become more widely available, and as the methods for accessing and processing the data become more widely understood. For nighttime light data specifically, the increasing availability of data sets and capacity building opportunities, including through the Geo4Dev initiative, is likely to accelerate this process. The findings of this systematic mapping exercise help add granularity and nuance to our understanding of how big data is being used in impact evaluations. But more work is needed, especially in unpacking the many ethical considerations in using big data to measure and evaluate development outcomes. It's also important to keep in mind that big data is a complement and not a replacement for traditional forms of data collection. there is still a critical role for locally gathered data to train machine learning algorithms, ground truthing to validate variables generated using big data, and mixed methods fieldwork to help tell the story of what's happening on the ground. The increasing ease of asking and answering questions about development impact from afar makes it more important than ever to prioritize meaningful stakeholder engagement, including of policymakers, implementers, and clients. It also underscores the need to make sure the advancing technologies of big data capture and processing do not disadvantage local researchers evaluating their own communities. We encourage you to review the Big Data Systematic Map and the accompanying report on the 3IE website. If you have suggestions, comments, or questions for us, or if you would like to share additional impact evaluations using big data, especially nighttime light data, please email us. Also, please stay tuned to the Geo4Dev, 3IE, New Light Technologies, SIGA, and World Bank websites for more information about upcoming conferences, workshops, or other events and resources. And thank you.